Okay, hello, welcome to Quality Time PEDAC Overview with Zenzi Ali, presented by Women Who Code Digital and the Dallas-Fort Worth Network. Let me introduce you to our host, Zenzi Ali.
Well, hello. Thank you, everyone. I'm so excited that I am able to kind of wrap up the year with something that we have been discussing all year long. We've taken the last few months to discuss preparing for that next role. We've often talked about things like creating a portfolio or behavioral interviews, but a lot of you have asked, what about those whiteboard interviews? How much should I know? What level should I be at before I attempt one? And I am hoping to give you some pointers and a quick prep course on a guideline system that I use that I love called PEDAC, which is a whiteboard interview. Well, it's a problem solving system that I find to be very helpful in reducing kind of the panic and clutter of solving problems. So I wanted to share that with you today. I'm just going to share my screen so that we're all set. All right. 1 second here. Okay. So, one of the questions and one of the things that we talk about in terms of tech is that a lot of folks have a goal of moving to that SDET or software developer in tech test role. And there's this kind of confusion around what types of questions that they should be prepared to answer. And as quality assurance professionals, I don't feel that we can necessarily be prepared to answer any and every question. I think that the best thing that we can do is really concentrate on our QA related skills and those procedures. And if you do not have a coding background, build up a fundamental coding knowledge and then attempt to apply to jobs that are at that level. So what I'm showing you is from Glassdoor, and this is something that I do whenever I am looking at a company. I will go to that company's Glassdoor profile, and I'll look in the interview section. And when you're in that interview section, you can sort by the role. So you can put in QA or SDET, and you will see how people fared during interviews and what kind of questions were asked. I don't know if you can tell because the text might be a little bit small, but if you look here, you can see that for this first interview, this is for a company called Flowcast. They were asked some playwright questions and some testing strategy questions, and they were asked a lot of theoretical questions. But if you look at the company on the right, I actually believe that this is from a local bank, a bank that's local to me. You can see they received coding questions about a Fibonacci series, finding all the prime numbers in a given range, and doing a palindrome check in a string. So if you have kind of a basic knowledge, meaning that you've taken a introductory coding course, you have the basic knowledge needed to answer any of those three questions. You might need to ask your interviewer for help in terms of if you don't know exactly what a Fibonacci number is, you might need to ask that, or examples of prime numbers, but they're all doable. So what I want to do is show you using the PEDAC method, what you can do using PEDAC with your skills in order to show that you are a thoughtful technologist who's competent in problem solving. So what does PEDAC stand for? It stands for process the problem, create examples, data structure, algorithm, and then code with intent. So PEDAC, which was taught by Launch School. I don't know if any of you are familiar with it. It is a coding boot camp. It's actually very good. It's one of the only for-profit coding boot camps that I recommend. And what it does is it helps each user confirm solution requirement and develop edge cases and solidifies their understanding of the problem with their interviewer. And I think it's good to think of an interviewer as a coding pair. So though you are the driver and you're doing the majority of the work, you should think of the interviewer as active within the process so that there's a conversation happening between the two of you because they want to know how you think. Even if you don't have time to finish the problem, they absolutely want to know your outline of what your thoughts were and if you could succeed in solving the problem. So basic knowledge of whatever construct you're using. So just using a process like PEDAC can show that you're a thoughtful, practical, and communicative developer, which is something that most people feel is an asset to any team. So why use a system? Once again, it is to allow for consistent problem solving. If you're not somebody who's solving problems and coding every day, you definitely want to develop a system so that you don't spend too much time figuring out an approach. You want to reduce the stress and reduce that analysis paralysis. I know personally, I know how to code, but I can spend far too much time thinking about what approach I want to take in a time environment. And if you're given 25 minutes or 30 minutes to solving a problem, you just don't have time for that. You need to have a system that allows you to kind of plot out what you want to do and get coding, but also not be a chaotic coder. This also, like I said, gives the interviewer a look into your thought patterns and they can understand your thought processes. And it also outlines the solution should time expire. So just in case you run out of time at the last moment or you get caught on a bug, they can at least see that you have the skills to finish. So now I'm just going to run us through a quick example. PEDAC is pretty self-explanatory, but I just want to show you kind of what it looks like in practice. So this is a coding problem. It's just an easy one that I found online from a coding challenge website called Edabit. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's a nice way to get started. I prefer it to a company like LeetCode because Edabit tends to write their coding challenges in very simple language so that there's no confusion. And it's a great place to start if you're not accustomed to solving coding problems. So this coding challenge is to return the first element in an array. Create a function that takes an array containing only numbers and return the first element. So let's get started with our first step in PEDAC. Process the problem. So you process the problem by confirming your understanding and identifying the type, the input type and output type, and establishing rules. Now, the great thing about being a quality assurance professional or an SDET is that you kind of live and die by rules. So you're very accustomed to kind of coming up with edge cases and being thoughtful in this way. So this gives you a great opportunity to ask thoughtful questions to your interviewer and build that rapport so that they understand that you're knowledgeable, but you want to make sure that you understand what they're asking for. What would be terrible is if you were quiet and they were quiet and you solved the entirely wrong problem without realizing it. So putting that tester hat back on and just making sure that you understand what they need is this is a great time to do this. And also to think about edge cases. So if you look here, I just wrote some notes about the challenge. So I just want to get the first value in an array. The input is an array and the output should be a number. And the rule was established that only numbers will be in an array, in the array. So I said, what kind of questions could I ask? The challenge was pretty clear cut, but I said, could the array be empty? Could one of the values be something other than a number? No. Could it be negative? Could it be positive? And I just tried to think about all of those. And I looked through the docs in Edibit, and it's only numbers, only whole numbers, negative and positive of any size. So I already know what rules now, and I can move on to my next step. So the next step is creating examples or test cases. Once you get your coding complete, you'll use these test cases to test out your solution. So for this, these are 3 test cases that I've created. I like to create like 3 or 4 just because of time. And I can always copy and paste these into my solution to confirm that I'm getting the output I expected. And this also gives me another way to confirm understanding, because I'm showing the interviewer, okay, so this is what I'll get. This is what my algorithm should produce. And I can get a yes, a no, or ask more questions at that point if there's some part of it that I don't understand. Okay, next is creating the data structure. Now in PEDAC, sometimes people take the data structure and algorithm part and kind of mash them together, but just for the sake of this presentation, I've broken them out into 2 separate steps. So for a problem that's this simple, there's not going to be a lot of discussion here. It's asking for a number. Numbers are kind of a primitive value. It's only asking for a single number. So it's not like there's going to be need for any type of data structure or some place to kind of house all of my answers. So, there's not much here, but in more complex problems where you might be returning multiple values, there could be a discussion on, especially in JavaScript, do you want to create an array? Do you want to create an object? And if so, what would the shape of that be? So there's a lot of discussions that can be had as your problems become more complex. And then the algorithm part is just taking the steps and creating either pseudocode or text around those steps. So because this problem is relatively simple, my pseudocode was really kind of short. It's just, okay, take an array, return a number, and to do that, I'm going to return the whatever value is at the 0 index. So the one good thing about having this step is that they can understand that you know the rules of your coding language. So just knowing that something is 0 indexed, some people don't know. So that gives you that other thing. You can also discuss solutions that might be more optimal. There are dozens of ways that you could probably solve this. I just chose the simplest because, once again, time is of the essence. I don't want to get tied up in a lot. I just want to get solved. And then if I want to optimize or restructure, I can do that later. So now you're just coding. So you're implementing and refactoring should you have the time, and using those chosen test cases to confirm that your algorithm works as expected. Mine is a quick arrow function, 1 line. You can do this as a standard pre-ES6 function as well. Doesn't really make that much of a difference. But I've done it this way, but there are alternate solutions. If you're a JavaScript person, you know that you can use one of JavaScript's built-in functions like shift or slice to get the same solution. And you can share that with your interviewer as a way to show that you are well-versed and in what JavaScript has to offer. But this gets you there just as well. You just use your 3 or 4 test cases that you've created, and then you move on. So just a few tips and reminders about using PEDAC and about working with a whiteboard interview, especially one that's virtual. Think aloud. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Just don't be silent for long, because they want to know what you're thinking, and they don't know where you're going. Don't be afraid to ask questions. So if you know something, like for JavaScript, there is something called slice, but there's also something called splice. If you're somebody who gets these 2 terms confused and you want to make sure that you're using the right one with the appropriate syntax, you can ask if you can have access to the documentation, or you can ask your interviewer if they wouldn't mind opening it up, or access to a calculator or anything else that you might need. There's no shame in that. Like I said, use Glassdoor to research the type and difficulty of any technical questions that might be asked. That's just good information to know, and it gives you the opportunity to study up pre-interview. Another thing that I don't have listed on here is if you are selected for a whiteboard interview, especially a virtual one, and they let you know what coding interface that they're going to use, like some type of virtual coding playground, I would take time to start toying with that a little bit, just so you see how that coding playground works. Today we'll be using Replit, which is pretty clear cut, but there are some where it's helpful to know where the console is, where the run button is, where the save button is, if it's going to format your code, if it has auto correct or auto save or anything. So those are all things that it's helpful to know ahead of time so that you can use that tool effectively. And also, PEDAC is not just for coding problems. When you're at work and you are working through a set of requirements for a testing framework, you can still break a problem down in the PEDAC format, so that you understand how you plan to work and that you don't kind of get lost in your own solution. So I just feel like it has a multitude of uses, and it can be very useful to those of us who are maybe career changers and haven't had as many opportunities to code effectively. I've outlined a few resources, and I'll put this in the chat. We have an article about PEDAC, a presentation that Launch School provided. And then if you look to the right there, Cracking the Coding Skills is a website that's part of Cracking the Coding Interview, which is, a very popular book in terms of interview prep. They have a section about interviewing as a software developer in test. And they also have this handy dandy flow chart that shows how you should be solving a coding problem. It's essentially really the PEDAC method. It's the same type of information, just broken out to even smaller parts. And either one is useful. The point is that you need to remember to do it. So you just need to build up that practice and get accustomed to using a method and procedure of choice. I also really like, there's a Medium series where several SDET developers share interview questions that they were asked when interviewed with questions from all over the world. The only issue with that, of course, is that Medium is behind a paywall. You only get a small number of articles per month. So if you happen to have a Medium subscription, or you want to use your Medium subscription for this, it's a great tool and it's great to understand what is out there. So, as we said in the beginning, GR has been gracious enough to offer his time. GR codes in Python, which is not my cup of tea. I've never used Python, but we have a coding problem here. Create a function that takes a list of numbers first, a string, and then returns a list of numbers as per the following rules. So I'm going to start to share the playground, and GR will attempt to lead us through his problem solving using some PEDAC style skills. Okay.
Zenzi, may I interrupt you? Is that the end of your presentation?
Oh, yes.
Yes, sorry. So thank you, everyone. That's the end of Zenzi's presentation, and we're just gonna meet separately to do over this coding exercise. Thank you.
Yes.